We're talking to Michael Scheid, who's a senior analyst at SJ Consulting Group. Michael, for those of us who may not be all that familiar with SJ Consulting Group, could you tell us a little bit about the company and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Dan. SJ Consulting Group is a research in logistics, transportation, and consulting firm that focuses solely on the freight transportation market. We cover all aspects of freight transportation from parcel to LTL, truckload, rail, air, and ocean. The company was founded in 1993 by Satish Jindal, who was instrumental in the startup and success of RPS, which is now FedEx Ground. Some of our services include industry analysis and benchmarking, yield management strategies, merger and acquisition due diligence, and as part of our ongoing research in the transportation and logistics space, we compile a list of the top transportation companies and trucking companies for various industry trade journals like Transport Topics.
Okay, great, thank you. And we did appreciate your help in putting this list together. Wonder if you could tell us a little bit about how the list was compiled and what you may have learned from doing this project.
Sure. So when we set out to do this list, we were looking to create a list that has never existed or never been made available to the public. We put together various lists on companies in the top trucking segments like LTL truckload, as well as a global logistics list, and even a list of the global transportation service providers, but we have never done one that focuses only on companies that own their assets. So the companies that own their trucks, trains, ships, and airplanes. So what we did is we did a lot of research on the largest companies in the transportation space, figured out how much revenue they have from the assets that they own, and used that to build the list. Mm-hmm. Something interesting that I learned from the list is the large extent to which railroads still play in global transportation. If you look at the U.S., the rail market comprises about 10% of domestic U.S. transportation revenues, but within the list, the railroads were the largest segment by far, and they accounted for $200 billion, or about a third of the $600 billion in revenues on the list.
Which may tell you something about the state of infrastructure development elsewhere in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It seems like rail is a bigger focus than even trucking, where these companies have more established infrastructure. Sure.
One of the things that surprised me, Michael, was the number of state-owned companies on the list. I counted 12, including railroads in China, Russia, even Germany. And an air freight carrier even. What can you tell us about the freight hauling capabilities of these companies, and are they comparable to private commercial carriers?
Sure. Well, there are some of the state-owned companies operate market monopolies, like the Russian railways, the Chinese railways. So they have the ability to set their own service and rates. But some of the other state-owned companies actually compete in the private market. Deutsche Bahn owns DB Schenker, the big logistics company. Emirates, the airline based in UAE, they operate a cargo division which competes against other cargo airlines. In the state-owned Chinese container ship lines, they compete against privately and publicly owned container ship lines. So these companies really have to make sure that they're adequate with price and service in order to be able to win customers' business.
Mm-hmm. Do you see any trend towards privatization of these companies, more than we've seen already? Or
I don't see any increase or decreasing trend of privatization. Russian railways have talked about going private, but that really hasn't taken off much. Conversely, these state-owned companies have actually made recent acquisitions of privately and publicly held firms like Russian Railways, which purchased the logistics operator Jeffco a few years ago. Toll Group, which is on the list, was purchased by the state-owned Japan Post. And even the two Chinese state-owned container ship lines, COSCO and China Shipping Group, are talking about merging. So I think there's more potential for that to happen rather than the companies to go, the state-owned companies to be privatized.
Okay. Another thing that's interesting, I think, for our readers to see is how these companies break down by mode and where they're based, obviously. there are only 5 companies, by my reckoning, on the list that are sort of pure trucking companies, and one of those, J.B. Hunt, is mostly an intermodal carrier, right? So we see rail and ocean transport as being much bigger factors in the global freight market. What else can you tell us, I guess, about the modal breakdown of the companies on this list and their ability to compete with each other?
Sure. Yeah, I think the list really reflects the global aspect of the transportation and logistics industries because, like you said, there are more ocean carriers ranked on the list than any other group of companies. There are 18 in total. And ocean is the dominant mode for moving goods between countries, across oceans, across borders, as compared to only 3 air freight carriers. So it shows you that the concentration of moving goods via ocean rather than via rail. As you said, there are only 5 trucking companies on the list, including J.B. Hunt, which is mainly intermodal. And despite the U.S. market being $700 billion for trucking, these companies only represent $22 billion. So it shows you that trucking companies aren't as large globally. They are large within the U.S., but it's not as common to have such large asset-based trucking companies elsewhere in the globe.
Yeah. It was interesting also the total freight revenue that you calculated for these 50 companies was over $600 billion, which is huge. Mm-hmm. And total revenue for these companies approaches $1 trillion. To me, that's surprising. Do you know off the top of your head how this compares to the size of the worldwide transportation marketplace?
I don't know the last time that I saw a number on the worldwide transportation marketplace. Like you said, the total revenues for these companies add up to a trillion. So clearly the total market is above $1 trillion. I think these companies could probably hold maybe 25% to a third of the total global transportation marketplace.
I see. Do you also feel like these companies, as big as they are going to get bigger? Because we have seen some deals involving some very large companies here recently, including XPO's purchase of Conway, which is on the list, right? FedEx making a bid for TNT in Europe. Both those companies are listed on the top 50. Do you think we'll see more of that?
Yeah, I expect more of that to happen. These are the large companies that have revenue and have income streams to be able to buy up larger competitors. We'll probably see more of it on the asset-based side. I think we'll also see more of it on the non-asset-based side. You mentioned FedEx. They also bought the non-asset warehousing provider Genco earlier in the year. UPS bought non-asset Coyote. APL Logistics was recently bought. So yeah, I think that's a trend that's going to continue.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Another thing that you helped us with is look at revenues for postal operators. Now, we know postal operators handle a lot of packages, so in that sense they compete with parcel carriers, which are also very prominent on this list. Tell us a little bit about what you found when you looked at the revenues for the top postal organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. And frankly, we were a little surprised at the size of some of the postal operators that we were able to find. We found 15 that did more than $3 billion in revenue. So essentially 15 of these companies would have been ranked on the top 50 freight list, from $3 billion for bpost, which is Belgian post office, up to $68 billion for the USPS, and China Post also does more than $60 billion, and that would have ranked the companies 1 and 2 if they had been included on the top 50 freight list. These companies are handling an increasing volume of packages. As mail declines, they've been able to find new revenue sources from the increasing shipping of B2C goods through growing e-commerce globally. So I think most of these companies have been able to capitalize on that.
So we should expect to see more direct competition between private parcel carriers, let's say, and postal services?
I don't know if I'd say there's going to be more competition. I think competition will be sustained. The postal operators have shown that they're able to, handle these volumes, and often they're able to do it for a price that is less than what the private parcel carriers can do. So yeah, I think it'll remain.
Mm-hmm. Okay, one final question about that. Do you see more privatization occurring with postal organizations than we've already seen?
Yep, there's been some privatization in Europe already, and actually the 3 postal operators on the list are predominantly privately owned, including Deutsche Post, which is part of DPDHL, Royal Mail, which was predominantly privatized a few years ago, and Post NL, which is the mail division of, formerly the mail division of TNT. Some other European postal operators are talking about privatization, including the Italian Post. So it may occur more in Europe, where it's more common. I don't think it'll occur, though, in the US or elsewhere.
No? Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Michael.
All right. Thanks a lot, Dan.
All right.